And then I see on the news, and I told Rob this earlier in the week, and Rob didn't have the same feed that I did, but on my feed, there are people in the streets splashing baby oil on each other because they are so excited about Diddy surviving this. Rob, I've been very excited to talk to you.
I know you have, Dave, and I joined this conversation with a solid amount of apprehension.
Because you're worried that your emotional, how excited you are for the content's going to be
Yeah,
overwhelming.
I
You don't be able to control yourself.
no, actually, I think the apprehension comes from the subject matter rather. You cajoled me into having this discussion.
We are talking about Diddy
Again,
again.
yeah,
And
that's the key point. We are having so he calls me last week and like because it's his turn to come up with the topic, and he's like, "I have a good idea." And in the back of my mind, I'm like, "Well, I know what's going on. I know exactly what he's going to suggest." I told my wife, "I bet he calls and he wants to talk about Diddy." And sure enough, he calls. "I think we should talk about Diddy." And I'm like, "I knew you want to talk about fucking Diddy again."
Oh yeah, I am. And let's just first of all, if you're listening to this and you can comment, please comment. Are you happy we're talking about Diddy? Or would you rather talk about whatever Rob wants to talk about?
But I am
So the
excited.
news.
I am excited after I paid a bit more attention to what's going on. So
Well, the news comes out that Diddy, he's not getting away with it, but I think for a lot of people, it feels like he's getting away with it. So he is going to be held accountable for the prostitution related charges, but the sex trafficking and the racketeering charges, he is not. He has not been found guilty.
correct.
Which, by the way, so I look at. I mean, I understand that there's a media storm
Oh yeah.
around Diddy, and I look at it and I go, the guy is an absolute. I did a video saying this guy is a monster and should be locked up
Mm-hmm.
forever. But the court, we got to trust the courts and the process or whatever. But apparently, he is not being convicted of racketeering or sex
Yes.
trafficking because there's not evidence that he forced people to do these freak offs. He did not force people to do them. He didn't push them to do
Yeah.
them. That's at least what the defense's
Yeah.
argument
And
was.
those were of the charges. The two he was acquitted of were the more serious of the charges. Long story short.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we don't know yet at this time of recording what's going to how much jail time he'll get, but
Right.
it'll include time served, and it's not going to. I mean, it's a couple of years. I think he's going to be out. That's what people are
I
fearful of.
I think so. What I read was the lawyers requested bail. Bail was denied. The maximum sentence he could get for these charges is about a decade. But people who've been following this legal, folks who are at least more aware of the legal process than I am, are thinking he'll probably get off with a total of 2 to 3 years.
And that may include
Time
time
served
served,
already. Yes.
which people are not. Well, I hear that and I go, my first reaction was the legal system has failed
Hmm.
us. And then I see on the news, and I told Rob this earlier in the week, and Rob didn't have the same feed that I did, but on my feed, there are people in the streets splashing baby oil on each other because they are so excited about Diddy surviving this. So, what I want to talk about today is I really want to talk about, from a psychological standpoint, how did the defense was looking at data. There was data there that made the argument that,
Yep.
in particular, Cassie Ventura and this Jane Doe, that they were at some level okay with these freak offs and at some level okay with the things that Diddy was
Yep.
doing. I want to talk about, and this is probably the more important part of the conversation, is where did that data
Hmm.
come from? But first, I cannot wrap my head around, especially women, hearing about this case. There's no question that he was very abusive, physically abusive, verbally. I mean, every kind of abuse there is, he was that and some.
Right.
Why are people in the streets splashing baby oil on each other?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even follow the case. The only like one of the 3 pieces of information that I knew of was one of them was the video of him, like, what, slapping Cassie, like, next to the elevator or something like that,
Yeah.
like, kicking
Kicking
it,
her,
yeah.
yeah.
Um, so that was the only thing I knew about. The conversation about, women in particular, I had with my wife. We were talking a little bit about this, and she said the same thing. She's like, "I don't understand." And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't either." And then I looked up the, composition of the jury. There were 4 female jurors.
Mhm.
And then I go back though and say, "Well, why would I suspect that women would have a different orientation?"
Well, because that was largely the population that he was victimizing.
Right, but on the jury. So are
So
you suggesting that because of who they are, they're going to be more likely to empathize with the folks that he's victimizing because they're almost all women or all women? I don't know if it's almost
he
or all.
I Yeah, okay, so I think there's 2 things. So part of it is what the jury experiences. So my assumption is that if you listen to the whole case, that the defense made the argument that what did was
Yep,
abusive, but it didn't it he wasn't coercing these people
correct.
into prostitution, so therefore you can't hold them accountable for sex trafficking. And what he did with the drugs and the violence and that kind of stuff, there wasn't that coercion and it wasn't a unified business around it. So you couldn't hold him accountable for
Okay,
racketeering. So he doesn't meet the criteria. So the jury has to go, hey, the guy's an asshole, but he can't be
right.
held accountable. I get that from like a legal, I think it was a legal argument. And my guess is the jury probably thought this guy's an absolute nightmare, but the crimes he committed do not meet
Right.
the criteria for the crimes that he's
Yep.
being charged with. But what I'm struggling with is why, when people in the popular culture hears about this, what is going on
Yep.
psychologically? Segment of the population that hears that this guy, who we know, there's no doubt about it, is punching, kicking, pulling Cassie Ventura. We saw it, and you're going to be out in the street splashing baby oil on yourself because you're so excited that he's getting out of prison. I don't understand. How do you how do you get
I
there?
I don't know. I don't have a definitive answer. My first reaction to it, and this is something, a topic I have thought about, even just having as a sole topic for one of our episodes. But there's something around this psychology of wealth and, famous people, celebrity, that goes on around
Mhm.
here. I think there's a couple of things going on. One is Diddy has been around since what, the early 90s. He has
Yeah.
been, a pop culture, phenom for, 25, 30 years. And as a
Mhm.
result, he's built up a lot of, at least culturally, goodwill. So again, with a lot of famous people, I feel like they think that they know him.
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
I was reading a little bit, right? He's also done a lot. There's a lot of, philanthropy he's done throughout the course of his career with different causes and communities that I think allow people to say, "Well, I don't like what he did," and there's
Mhm.
a lot of other positive attributes about him, and I have
Yeah,
experienced
he's
those
good for the
things.
community. Yeah. Yeah, he's good for the community. Okay, so he's good for the community, that's their perception. He's good for the community. They have a parasocial
That's it.
relationship with
Yep.
him. Like, they've grown up
Mhm.
with him. So he's sort of they're part of his community by proxy,
Yep.
and so it feels like a family member or someone.
Yeah. And then the last thing, and this is a jump. I'm starting to sound like you a little bit,
Oh, here we go. You finally some wisdom.
but I
Yes.
I wonder if there is something around, um just like, the culture, at least in the United States right now, around the like people feeling unfairly targeted. Like, especially men have this sense. Now, women, of course, are like jumping around and stuff like this too, like you mentioned. But I wonder if this would have happened 20 years ago when there wasn't such talk culturally of, you know, men not getting their fair shake, that, men don't get, it's automatically an accusal. So even if they don't do anything, what stays with their reputation and their brand is they were
Yeah.
accused of something, not that they were
Yep.
acquitted of something. And granted, he wasn't acquitted of everything, although he was acquitted of the biggest charges. And
Mhm.
so I
Mhm.
have no data or facts to back that up, but that's just something in the back of my head that I wonder is if culturally that has anything to do with what's going on. So those are my
Mhm.
three thoughts
Mhm.
around the context of all of this outside of just the individual himself.
I think it it makes sense, especially from a cultural standpoint. When you're saying, I was thinking, if you are a Black American, I think there is and you grow up in this environment of systemic racism, there is a perception that you're going to be
Mm,
unfairly treated by the courts, and so I think that that's also part of it, where it's like you've got this man who has been a community leader who's now in prison, and he gets out. It's like
yeah.
the courts finally looked for us when for
And
so
so
long,
frequently, yeah.
frequently, right? And so I think there's yeah, I don't know. I mean, I hadn't thought about the masculinity component of it, but that's probably part of it also, is that the police or the rules or the structure, there's not a lot of not a lot of goodwill there, and so no matter what, people are happy that he got out.
Yeah, I had thought
But
about the racial component of this too. It's a bit murkier here because, you know, most sides here, we're all talking about other Black people.
Mhm.
And so, yes, it to me, I didn't think about this as much because there wasn't like multiple races in the situation. It was primarily
Oh, you mean
like he's
you mean
Black
like
and
if for example.
his alleged victims were also Black for the most part,
Uh-huh,
or at least,
uh-huh,
Cassie and some of the other folks. So it didn't occur to
yes,
me as much the racial component, like maybe an O.J. Simpson verdict or something like that. Um,
yeah,
that doesn't mean it's not part of the equation here, but it did not occur to me as much because of that.
mhm. I wonder if it's funny because I wonder if you could stop because I wish I could find the clip and show it, the clip of these people splashing baby
So
oil
that's a
on
real thing. I
themselves.
thought you just made that up. There's an actual clip.
This is yeah, oh, yeah, yeah, more than one clip. People celebrating by splashing baby oil. I mean, just anyway, I would like to stop, like, I would love to intervene, but excuse me, can you share with me what you're happy about in
Yes.
particular and why you're happy about it, right? And I wonder how well they would be able to articulate that this is the thing that I'm pleased about versus Diddy got out. But like I wonder how much of it is conscious
I
versus
think
how
that's
much of it
it.
is, "Hey, I've always hated the system, and right now the system didn't beat my favorite rapper, so I'm happy. And I don't care about anything else other than, you know what I mean? They may not be able to articulate or be aware of exactly what it is that's the trigger, but there's strong emotion tied to it,
I
you know?
I think that is true of a lot of celebrities who have a number of parasocial relationships with their fans.
Yeah,
So going back to that
yeah.
episode we did a while back, right? Is you feel this sense of connection with someone you've never met before. And it seems illogical.
Mhm.
Like, why
Yeah.
would you have such a strong connection with Diddy? Well, for all the
Yep.
reasons we talked about in that episode, right? There's just
Mhm.
frequency, interaction. He's been around for a long time. You really enjoy what he does. For 30 years, you heard about all the positive sides of what he did for, again, different
Mhm.
causes and communities. So it can be sometimes
Yeah.
difficult, I think, for people to swallow that pill. And the information that they're getting could be biased.
That's true also. Yeah. That is true. It's not like, no one's in the court, so you don't you're getting it communicated to you through, you know, media. So who knows what media they're
Right,
hearing.
and increasingly social media. So they're not
Mhm.
getting, this from their from the 6 o'clock news or from their newspaper, right? They're getting this from shows on YouTube.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. So, okay, so that's the first
Okay.
issue. The second issue that I think is more serious, more important to talk about is the defense's argument was, and they had text messages in particular that were really damning for this Jane Doe who didn't want to have her identity
Yep.
revealed, and Cassie Ventura. And essentially, what they were pointing to that was sort of really helped Diddy was in the text messages, they would say to him, "Hey, I had a great time at that freak off. Looking forward to doing it again." Or when she was on the stand, she was testifying, she was saying, "I still have love for him there." And so people, I think, are hearing this and going, well, there's a strong connection between Diddy and these women. They may not have loved all the things that happened in these freak offs, but he wasn't coercing them into
Hmm.
doing it. That was the argument. And I would, from the outside, I don't know that I believe the argument, but that was the argument that was made, and it was enough that he got
Yep.
off. So what I wanted to talk about is, why would a victim of abuse maintain such a strong connection with
Yep.
their abuser? I think that dynamic is really important. So let me give you my sort of
Okay.
spiel on it, and then I want you and then you react to it and give me
Okay.
your thought. The first thing is, there's this concept of trauma
Hmm.
bonding. Trauma bonding happens when you have two people who are engaged in really um, really painful
Hmm.
experience. You have the abuser. When abuser abuses, I've said this a lot of times, th- typically they are not planning and excited about
Right.
abusing. There is some kind of deep insecurity, there's some kind of anxiety, there's some kind of distress, something, and they lash out in an effort to protect
Right.
their insecurity, to protect
Yep.
their anxiety. And so when they do this, they create this sort of response to protect themselves, and they are very vulnerable in that moment. And the person that was abused sits there and sees it and stays
Hmm.
with them. So that creates a connection between the abuser and the abused. The same thing is true with the person that is being abused. They are in a moment where they are incredibly weak. They are incredibly damaged. They have been hurt by this person, and they still stay there. And so the abuser then feels more
Yep.
connected to them. The abuser feels bad for having done it, and this person
Hmm.
stayed. So they're both like very vulnerable and become very connected. And so you have this trauma bond where you have this like enmeshed relationship.
Yep.
I think that's a really important thing to understand, because if you talk to either of those people, Diddy or the abused, and you ask, what's your connection to each other, they're going to say there's a lot of love there, because they really have been through war with each other, even though it's been a catastrophic
Yep.
interaction. And I feel frustrated because I feel like that wasn't communicated well to the jury. And that's why the jury listened to things like a text message where Cassie says, "Love you, want to see you again." Because in my world, that doesn't mean anything
Correct.
because of that
Yep.
bond.
I I mean, I think that makes a ton of sense. I would add to it that there is another thing happening here, which is the power, money, and influence that someone like Diddy carries with him.
Mhm.
So again, we don't. I should say, I don't know all the ins and outs of the trial, um, of all the evidence presented, but from what I've gathered, it took Cassie a long time to speak out. Like this started in 2023. Is that when she
Yeah.
first spoke
Yeah.
out?
Yes.
Do you happen to know why? Like what was like the final straw?
I don't know, and I'm not even sure if she was the first to speak
Okay.
out, but they had been together for like
Yeah.
10 years or something, before she
Okay.
did. And I don't know what initiated it.
So for me, it's like a loss aversion as well. Like she had a little bit of a career a couple,
Mhm.
15, 20 years ago. but a lot of, like speaking out and doing this, there's a lot of downside for someone like her,
Yeah.
right? She loses money, she loses connection, she loses influence. So this,
Yeah.
not that it doesn't significantly change most people's lives who speak out and file charges, but this adds even an additional layer of complexity of the power and wealth that may not always
Mhm.
be the case for these types of abusive situations. And so that's the other thing that goes through my mind here too is there's always that sense of loss, I imagine, in these situations, but for her, the loss is huge in ways
Yeah.
that might not always be the case for others.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, if you can if you think about the loss aversion, so you think about it like from like a financial standpoint and like her career, but also the amount of time that she's been committed to the relationship. She's put up with
mhm,
Diddy and all that Diddy is for 10, you know what I mean, for 10 years, and there's this hope that it's gonna get better. There's this hope that, and
yes,
so it's like, it's hard to give that
yes.
up.
And so I'd have to imagine that that's a big part of it is you're giving up a ton. You're giving up what you've known for the past 2 decades, and it's gonna have a significant
So do you
impact on
yeah.
your life as a result.
So if Diddy is consciously or unconsciously wielding that, like the power that he had over her in the relationship or the her financial
Yep.
future, um, or the connection that they had, if he's wielding
Mhm.
that, to get her to do what he wants, do you think of that as being coercion, or is it too subtle to sort of qualify like that? So let me like the other here's the other argument would be for my wife to leave me. I think she would have there would be some loss. Like there's a financial component to our
Sure.
relationship. It's slightly different than Diddy's, but there's still a financial component. Okay.
Just a little bit.
There's a there's a slight small difference. There's a financial component. We have a family together. We've been together for 20 plus years. There's a lot of things that she would lose if she
Right.
left me. If I ask her to go do some fucked up freak off and she does it, does that count? In your mind, am I coercing her if I'm using that loss aversion to get her to do what I
Yeah.
want?
God, that's are you coercing her? I mean, to me, it's like, what's the line between persuading and coercion?
Right.
There's a power
Yeah.
component there. Like in your relationship, in that example, do you inherently have more power? I think for yours, the answer is no.
I
Um,
promise you, the answer is no.
but but yeah, I think that's the difference for me. So if there was, like you mentioned, everything that binds you two together, if you
Yep.
are in some way control of the majority of the things that bind you together, or the ones that really matter, whatever that is, then there is a power
Mhm.
differential there.
Yeah.
And in that case, Allison might do something she doesn't want to do because she worries about the implications of not doing it. I know
Yes.
I'm saying all this out loud, but that's
So then it would fall under the bucket of coercion,
I
right? I
think
mean, yeah.
I think that that sounds coercive to me. Same with me. If I were to ask Jen to do something that she didn't want to do, but she felt that the repercussions for her for not doing it would have a significant negative impact on our relationship, and that is why she did it,
Mhm.
then that's more likely to be coercive, right?
I think so. I mean, as I'm talking about, I'm going like, how the hell did the jury not think that he was coercing her? Because I mean, I guess it's a measure of how significant it is.
Yeah, of his
Y
the power that he was able to wield.
Yeah, yeah, because I think if as far as how I would coercion is just you getting someone to do something they
Right.
don't wanna do by using some kind of power or control that
Mhm.
you have, and I think that it's true that in any relationship, you can coerce people using the history, the money, the kids, whatever the
Yep.
thing is. And it sounds like he did that. So, um,
Yeah. I
yeah.
I think it is. Yeah, and I don't know why the I'm not sure how the information was presented, but maybe
Mhm.
that was part of the reason that some of those lower charges did stick.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other thing that comes to mind here um, is just like him in general. So we've talked about their dynamics of just using Cassie and Diddy as an example. But to me, I mentioned this psychology of wealth before, and I think that there's something there. And this is more the focus on Diddy, less on Cassie and some of the other folks that he abused, but more on him. Like, what causes someone to do this? And we talked a little bit about this before in previous episodes. Like we were talking about Gabby Petito, for example. Like what causes someone to become abusive? So I won't
Mhm.
retread that information. Please go
Mhm.
back and listen to that episode to get some more insight there. But I think again, the added level of complexity here is what I imagine an ungodly amount of wealth. Like, do you know? I should have looked this up. Do you know how much he's worth, or he was worth before all this?
I don't know how much he's worth.
I mean, we could look that up probably pretty quickly, but
Yeah.
look it up while I'm talking, maybe.
Yep, I
Um, but I mean, it has to be a lot of money. And I think, again, going back to things I've said before, from my perspective, I think that the situation that someone finds them in is highly impactful to how they operate in the world around them. At times, more so than just their innate personalities. That the environment has such a strong impact on people.
so the number, by the way, I looked it up, is a
So,
billion. He's worth a
so
billion.
yeah, I mean, so he is in the world. I don't know how many zeros you want to put after the decimal point before you get to the
Yes.
one, but yeah, an ungodly amount of money.
Yep. But so you think, so your position would be that Diddy, had Diddy not been as wealthy as he is, he would be less of a monster.
Slightly. I would say that if you were to do like, the road not taken, and you see Diddy as
Yes.
like I forget how old he was when he became famous, but let's say it was, 20. If
Yeah.
you look and
Yeah.
see where if he was just doing the same thing he was doing when he was 20, his life went down that same road versus where it
Yeah.
ended up going that he's worth $1 billion. Let's assume that if he was going down that same road, he would not be worth anywhere near $1 billion. I
Yes.
feel that because of that fork in the road that his life ultimately went down, that in part has allowed him to do the types of things that he's done and have the worldview that he has. And I think that there's some research to back me up on this.
Well, I have good news for all of our listeners. Rob doesn't have the research in front of him. So he's dead wrong. He's not going to be able to pull the research up fast enough to tell me I'm wrong. I think you're dead
Why?
wrong. So let me tell you what, let me
Okay.
argue with you. I think that the wealth allowed him to be the monster that he already was. I think that he grew up. I mean, I'll give like a high level overview of his childhood. Um, Dad was murdered when he was
Okay.
very young. I think he was like 2 or 3 when his dad was murdered. Raised by a single mom. Mom had 3 or 4 jobs all at once. If you look on the internet, no one really knows what all of those jobs were. Diddy says that he had a very positive relationship with her. Jury's sort of out on what that actually looked like, but he was in many ways on his own a
Mm-hmm.
lot, and mom had lots of men over, and there's on the internet a lot of debate about what that actually looked like. But I think that at a very young age he grew up in an area where he learned the power of violence, he learned the power of money, he learned the power of sex. And I think he was, growing up, someone who had very little impact on the, I think he didn't have any power, and he learned that these things, violence, sex, drugs, were really powerful. And so because he became a billionaire and he was able to get his arms around all of these things, I think it it added
Sure.
oxygen to this already distorted mind. But I think the mind was distorted. And here's what my argument would be, or why I would this is what I would say is there are a lot of people that are like I'm trying to think. I don't when did Denzel Washington become
80s.
uh
His I think his breakout role
how
was
old is
in a TV show called Saint Elsewhere in the 80s.
it is wild to me that you can just pull that fast. But Denzel Washington has had more money than God and is a very and like at least in my mind very stable like that he wasn't corrupted by money. He was the one I'm thinking of him because he was the one when Will Smith slapped Chris Rock, he walks over to tell Will Smith, "Hey, don't let the devil get a hold of you." Right? He was like a stabilizing
Right.
force. So it's for some people it doesn't distort them, but for others it does. And it can't just be
Oh,
the money.
so to be clear, yes, I don't think it is just the money. And that background, it may make even more sense. And although I hate when people use this word sometimes, it's overused, but that the intersection of his
Yeah.
his money and his background, where how he grew up,
Yeah.
is likely to be more impactful to the person and man he became. So yes. So
Yep.
I agree with you, especially in this particular example, that was probably
Yeah.
more impactful.
Yeah.
But I do think, and just going back to some of the research I did into this, right? I mean, having that amount of money, it does affect you in a lot of ways. I think that there's a sense of invincibility about you.
Mhm.
I think especially describing how he grew up, like he grew up in a world where no one did anything for him, it sounds like. Fast
Yeah.
forward 10
Right.
years, he was rich enough to have a man follow him with an umbrella over his head.
Right.
He had people
Yeah.
to do everything, and those people likely had their own people.
Yeah.
So there is, and I don't know if that's a, if that's a symptom or if that's a cause. I think it's a little bit of both. But there's something
Yeah.
about living that lifestyle. And then going back to what we were saying with Cassie, if there is someone maybe towards the end that you think is going to affect that, I mean, what is his mindset as far as, well, what are you going to do? Like, I mean, I'm sure at some point those two had fought. And she had probably
Mhm.
said something like, I'm gonna go to the authorities, I'm gonna go to the press, I'm gonna do something.
Yeah.
And because he had so much to lose, it's not abnormal for someone in his situation to say, no, you're not, and then be even more abusive. But God,
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
his case, there's a ton to lose, both monetarily and reputationally. And
Yeah.
I think that that affects how he reacts in the situation, or how someone like him would react in the situation.
Yeah. Yeah. What you're talking about, I'm thinking, um, I also wonder, like, to your point, there's the invincibility piece, but also early on, he was I wish I knew who the characters were, but right, like his big break was with
Yep.
Biggie, but he was interacting in a world where there was a lot of violence.
Sure.
Like violence I would imagine that violence, drugs, and sex were also
Yep. Yep.
normalized for him.
Yep.
You have the combination, the intersection also of he has the ability to get it. It's like, man, it's almost like thinking about like someone who watches a tremendous amount of pornography and it distorts how they view sex because they've seen so much that now the normal thing is no longer
Yep.
enough to make it
Yep.
happen. So it gets everything gets distorted. And I wonder if the same thing applies to so in that way, the wealth, right, the that coupled with the invincibility sort of exacerbates the problem
Right. Because this had to have been
big time.
going on for a very long time, and he had gotten away
Mhm.
with it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
in
it's
his
funny. I
mind,
remember
right,
him
it's a reinforcing cycle here.
Yep. I remember him interviewed, like, when I was in because it's funny, like he's part of mine and yours childhood, right? Like I remember him being interviewed on VH1, like talking about his story when he was. I mean, I think he was like in the mailroom initially of the record
Mm,
studio, and like as he progressed and the things he saw, and he talked about. I remember him talking about like at the age of 20 or 21 being totally out of control, and somebody had to sit him down and be like, "Hey, you can't operate that way
yeah.
here. It's not going to go well for you." And he had sort of, you know, regulated himself a little
Yep.
bit, but
Yeah.
yeah. So okay, all right. So I agree. It's both, right? So he had something to regulate, but also because of his childhood, I think he had something to
Yeah.
regulate, and the wealth makes it much much
Right. So you
worse.
could argue that someone who did not come from that background, assuming it was pretty difficult and having experienced what he experienced, maybe would not do this, right? There are plenty of wealthy people who did not grow up wealthy who don't
Hmm.
have freak offs.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think, yeah, so maybe he was more predisposed to that because, but then again, I think that goes back to it was it him or his environment shaped him that way. And it
Hmm.
sounds like his environment, because again, there's plenty of people who don't do that, who have become
Hmm.
wealthy and have their own issues, I'm sure,
Yeah.
but not to that extent.
Yeah. 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 I it's funny. I don't, as we're talking about it, I'm just thinking, I'm trying not to agree with you, but I think I agree with you about the wealth thing
God, the
because
amount of times on this show where that happens, where you try just to be, obtuse and oppositional, and you're like, all right.
but
But
the
the
point
point
is
is
like
that you always come around to me and my perspective because I'm right.
that's yes. The reason why the thought I had was if you told me I have the ability to make my kids uber wealthy early on, I would say absolutely not. Like, that would be the last thing I'd
Yes.
want for
This
my
was a
kids,
question.
right?
Yes.
'Cause it would screw them up.
Yes. I 100% agree. And I think this is selective memory, of course, because I don't know of or remember like child stars that grew up pretty normal. Right. None
Yeah.
occurred to me, but I know a
Mhm.
ton that didn't. I just saw
Right.
an ad yesterday. Lindsay Lohan is now a spokesperson for Pure Leaf Tea, and I think of her, and I'm like, God.
Mhm. Yeah, she's been on a
And
ride.
yeah, I agree with you.
Mhm.
I think that the experience from that young of an age, Justin Bieber just comes to mind again as well, of like someone who
Mhm.
has so much money, so young, combined with whatever else is going on in their life at the time, your reality is
Mhm.
so distorted. And
Yeah.
then when that goes away, assuming it does, because for most of them it does,
Mhm.
your
Mhm.
ability to be resilient against all of the things that normal people have had to learn over the course of their teen years and early 20s to
Mhm.
navigate and manage is low because again you have this dude next to you with an umbrella over the top of your head or people who do
All the
everything
time.
for
Yeah.
you. And
Yeah.
so you don't know how to manage when things don't go your way. So I
Yeah.
100% agree with you. I think it
Yeah.
it is short-term gain for long-term pain.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. All right, that's good, Rob. I think do you have any other Diddy? I know that do you have any other Diddy
I mean,
related
I don't think
topics?
so. Other than I think I mentioned this the last time we talked to him, which is a sentence I never thought I'd say. But yeah, he was my first CD I ever bought. It was when Columbia House was a thing, and right, you get like 15 CDs for $1.
I did.
Yeah,
I did. Yes. Uh-huh.
and his was one of the first ones I bought. It was the edited version of No Way Out, Puff Daddy and the Family. So I had to get the edited version because my mom wouldn't let me get the explicit version. I later on got the explicit version. I'm sure like a Sam Goody somewhere when I was at the mall by myself. But yeah, no, yeah. I mean, he was. I've enjoyed his music for a long time.
This is off topic, but I have to just ask, did you ever listen to Nine Inch
No,
Nails?
that was not my jam as a youngster.
I'm a little bit older than you. When I was in, I think, 6th grade or 7th grade, Nine Inch Nails came out with their song. I think the title of the song was Downward
Okay.
Spiral.
I don't know it.
And I went to
Okay.
look it up. I went to Sam Goodies or something with my dad, and I was like, I really want to get this album. And so he's like, okay. And so I was sitting there, and they let me
Yeah.
listen to it. And he had like the
The liner
CD
notes,
album,
yeah.
like the lyrics, and he was like, take those headphones off him right now. Like we were in the store, started screaming to take it because like the whole song is like, I want to fuck you
Oh,
like
that
an
song,
animal.
yeah.
Oh, you know what I'm talking about?
I wanna know you
And I
from the
remember,
inside.
yes. And then I remember like a month later, me and like 4 kids had broken into one of my friend's older brother's room, and we would just be around the boombox just listening to that song and thought we
Yeah,
were so
yeah.
cool.
Yeah,
Anyway,
that was
some
the
good time.
same. I think like anything else, at least in our culture, right? Putting those ratings on CDs just made people want it more. Like,
Yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
didn't need to hear people say "fuck," but because
Yeah.
I couldn't, I wanted it more. I needed the explicit version. I
Yeah.
didn't wanna
Oh
feel like a
yeah.
baby that couldn't handle it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Rob. Thank you for putting up with another
It
Diddy
was actually
episode.
worthwhile. So, I guess you and I both won something here. You made me talk about Diddy, and I actually liked it. So, twice.
Very good. All right. Thank you. Let us know what you think in the comments below, and check us out on social media at Shrink Space Show
That's
everywhere.
right.